Hey guys, Alicia Mackay here. I don't know about you guys, but I have had a pretty overwhelming time over the last couple of weeks. I've had a lot on, and I've got some big initiatives at the moment that I'm trying to focus my energy on in my business and at work. And rather than doing that in a really structured, useful way, I've just been kind of banging around, overwhelmed for the last week or two, doing a little bit of one thing and then a little bit of another, getting trapped in the details, feeling overwhelmed, and ending each day feeling as though I wasn't really making any progress and I wasn't sure whether I could deliver on some of this big stuff in the time that I need to, which was causing a bit of anxiety for me. I decided to deal with that by eating my own dog food and applying some of the prioritization techniques that I use with leaders and with teams so that they can get clear on their strategy and their focus. And it made a huge difference to how I felt this week and how confident I am that I'm going to do the most important stuff I need to do. After I did that and I looked at all the stuff I've made, I thought, I think other people might like to see that too. And so I've made this quick video to walk you through the process that I used so that you might be able to use that too. All right, let's get stuck in. The first thing you need to do when you are feeling overwhelmed is to get all of that information out of you. All right, you are currently carrying around a long list, some of which is invisible to you, of different projects, tasks, promises, and events. And that's what's causing the overwhelm. And so the first thing we need to do is to make it really tangible and just pick up a pen, write down everything that's freaking you out, so that we can begin to work with it. Now, what is probably helpful is actually to start it like I did here and then add to it over a period of time. So start the list and then throughout a day or so, just keep adding to it as you think of things. You'll see that there's different pen colors and things in the list that I've made here because I've come back and added things while I've remembered things that I should be working on. So you want to write down everything you can think of, big things, small things, random stuff. You'll see I've got on there I need to book accommodation for a trip I'm going on in May, which I've done. And don't worry too much about them all being kind of the same size. You can always group them later. The most important thing is that you get it all out. Once you have a list to work with, you then need to take a step back and zoom out and think about what your overall goals are at the moment for the year, for the quarter, for whatever the time period is that you're thinking about. You want to be thinking, okay, so what are we focusing on? What are we trying to do? This is really important because this is the strategic framework that we'll use to create our criteria for how we prioritize all of the tasks on that big long list that you just wrote. Now, in my business in 2023, I've got the 3 E's and my big focus this year: e-commerce, e-learning, and enterprise solutions. And the 3 focus areas that I am putting my energy and attention into, or I want to, over the next year is these kind of 3 main items that you'll see in that list below there. So high quality, multi-format content, a high-performing digital pipeline, because mine's currently a mess, and self-led team development. Now, what you want to make sure that you're working with here is not tasks, right? It's not projects. We're coming to that. It's your big picture goals and your medium-term focus areas. And if you haven't done this work, then that is absolutely something that it is worth you taking half a day or an hour or whatever it's going to take you to do that, because there's no way that you can get clear on what you need to do unless you know why you're doing it and how you plan to get there. Okay, so this is step number 1. Lucky for me, I already had this flip chart hanging out in my office, lurking in the corner, just reminding me of what I should be doing and feeling like I'm not getting anywhere near. All right, step number 3, when you've got your criteria clear, is to make sure that those goals, those focus areas, have been prioritized. So a really common thing that happens is that we write a list of objectives or priorities, and they're mainly just a list of nice things that we want, rather than necessarily direction about what's the most important. And luckily, this is actually quite easy to do. You can use a tool that I use quite often, which I call the $100 game. But essentially, if you've ever been part of a panel who's assessed a series of tender responses or anything like that, you'll be familiar with this kind of multi-criteria analysis tool, where what we want to do is take our criteria, which in my case, remember, was those 3 goals: the content, the digital pipeline, and the self-led team development, and assign them a weighting out of 100. So in my case, the pipeline, I think, is my most important thing that I want to do, because I've got this overall kind of vision for the next few years about having a more passive and flexible business that reaches more people. So the performance of my digital pipeline is a really important part of that. So I gave that 50%. I gave the high quality multi-format content a 30% weighting, because I think that's going to be a really key lever in making the current programs and courses and stuff that I have more scalable and more accessible for people, so that they can access it in different ways and I can sell it in different ways. So I gave that 30%. And then the self-led team development, which is kind of an emerging priority for me. It's something I'm experimenting with. I gave 20%. It's important, but it's not going to be the main contributor to my big picture goal. So that's how I've spent my $100. Go ahead and do that with your goals and your focus areas as well. The next step is to use that criteria, and here's where it starts to get magic. So that last bit can be kind of messy. It can feel a bit abstract, a bit theoretical. But once you've done that, you get to make a magical table. So what I want you to do using a spreadsheet or just a piece of paper is to draw up a multi-column, multi-row table. At the top of your columns, you're going to have your goals and the weighting you've assigned to them. And then you're going to leave a column on the right for scoring. And then what you're going to do with your rows is to list all of those tasks off your running to-do list, so that you can do a bit of maths and score your tasks, your projects, against the criteria that you've developed. So here's a picture of what mine looked like. You'll see that I drew up the matrix and I reminded myself at the top of the weightings. I then used a really basic scoring system, 1 being low, 2 being medium, 3 being high, for how well I felt this task overall, you want to go with gut feel here, aligns with those focus areas. And I just chucked all the scores in the table, nice and speedy. Once I'd put those raw scores in, so you'll see there that, for example, I thought that case study write-ups would have like a medium alignment to the digital pipeline, because it can be a useful tool for people to read through different case studies before they convert. I thought that in terms of high quality multi-format content, that's something I'm a bit light on at the moment. So there's probably a medium alignment there with having different forms of content available. But in terms of self-led team development, it's not a 0, because people might want to read success stories, but it's probably not very high. So that's a low, that's a 1. Once you've got all of those raw scores in, you can then go through and you can see the little boxes in the corner there that I've used and weight those scores according to the weightings from our last step. So for example, the top line, content audit and optimization, you'll see that I gave that a 2 against high performance digital pipeline, but that with a 50% weighting, that makes it a 1. I gave it a 3 against high quality multi-format content, which against the 30% weighting criteria gives it a 0.9, and I'd given it a 0 for self-led team development, which gives me a total weighted score of 2.2, and so on and so forth. So you'll use your scoring table, your scoring column on the far right, to just chuck all those scores in. Once you've done that, you can then see what's come out on top. And this was an interesting one for me, because I had a bunch of equal ones. So there was a clear number 1 with that content audit. There's a clear number 2, which surprised me actually, with the workbook creation. And then there was a bunch of things that all came in equally at 1.8, the web audit, buyer's journey audit, sorting out the Shopify situation, case study write-ups, a few things like that. So we want to take what's come out of those results and we want to work with them by drawing out those top priorities and thinking about what we want to do next with them. So in my case, number 1 was clearly the content audit. So that's number 1. Number 2 was the workbook creation. I wrote that down. And then number 3, I realized those things that ranked equally were actually all kind of part of the same theme, the same situation. So I thought, well, actually, the buyer's journey is part of the web audit. The case studies, testimonial integration, part of the web audit. Sorting out the Shopify, part of the web audit. So I listed those in groups. And then you want to kind of readjust those as required. So I looked at the workbook creation and thought, yeah, I can see that that's useful, but I think it's a part of a couple of other things, actually. So I think it's a contributor to the curriculum refresh that I've got for Meetings That Matter and a strategic plan, for the enterprise programs that people want to be doing for the more self-led stuff. It's probably part of that. So I'm just going to kind of bump that down into those. And consultants of choice, which has come in at number 4 on this list, it has a time-sensitive thing with it. And it really needs to be further up that list because I'm launching that in April. So I've bumped that up to number 2. And then thought, well, there's probably no point beginning this kind of web audit process in any structured fashion until I've worked with the content, because I want my web experience to be guided by the content that people are accessing. So I've kind of moved that down to number 3. So you just want to have a think about, does that make sense? Does it need to move around? Do things fit together okay? Once you've done that, you can take your top, might be 1, might be 3. In my case, it was 2, and flesh those out a bit more. So chances are, if you've got big stuff on your agenda, you're aware that there's a lot in it, and you're often thinking of the little things you want to add and the things you want to look at, and you're reading things online and you're sending emails and talking to people. But you might not have taken a really structured kind of project management approach, or even just detailed approach to working out actually what are the ingredients that make this thing up? What are the steps involved? So this will look different for all of you. In my case, I looked at what I thought the steps were. So for the content audit and optimization, it was around, collating content, tagging and theming it, organizing it by clusters, seeing where the gaps were, and then kind of refreshing and redesigning those. Just kind of wrote those down in steps, which made me start to breathe easier as I went, to be honest. What some of the dependencies were, what it was connected to, who was responsible. So I'm the lead on it, but I probably want a bit of support with some of the web design and that kind of stuff. And thought, well, I'm estimating there's 30 hours in this. I've probably got 6 hours a week that I can dedicate to it. So it's probably going to take me about 5 weeks. All right, good. And then I did that for consultants of choice as well. Just kind of gave it some life, breathed some detail into it. Once you've done that, you should be feeling an awful lot better. You know what the most important things are that you need to focus on. You've got an idea of what's involved in them and how long it's going to take. And then all you need to do is go ahead and stick that in your calendar. Make sure that you've got the time allocated to making those things happen. Once you've sized it and you know the containers, so in my plan, for example, I've got 6 hours on content audit a week and 8 hours on consultants of choice launch a week. You know what the milestones are, when you're going to be able to deliver it, and where you might need to draw in support. Stick all that into your calendar. And from there, it's kind of up to you. Hopefully this is a useful way to help you get past your overwhelm. It has certainly been useful for me this week. And now I have to go do 2 of my 8 hours on consultants of choice. So enjoy.